Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, sitting down for some Bethesda news. Now wait, before you get all bent out of shape, not a negative news video this time around. I know, last week brought us back to the very scary times of the canvas bag shortage of 2018, just terrifying times that, but I'd have to say that the fall of Redfall 2023 managed to supersede anything of the canvas bag shortage of 2018, I'll tell you that. But ladies and gentlemen, we are going to discuss Redfall a bit toward the end of the video. However, the main subjects here are Starfield and its official US-based rating leaked by Bethesda themselves, and what that actually means for the violence section of the game, which is important. There's a lot to be said about it. And then also, we're going to get into some leaked Fallout set photos because there are more, and some of them, man, just Amazon. I'm impressed. I'm about to take my biggest L of all time. I can't believe it, but I can't wait to see the show. Here's hoping that trailer's on the way. But ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here, you're into Bethesda news and information. If the last week was anything to go off of, when things pop off, your boy's right on top of it. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for all your support lately as we steamroll our way to that Xbox game showcase with the Starfield Direct, where I imagine there will be a lot to talk about. But before any of that Bethesda news, allow me to tell you about today's sponsor. The following video is brought to you by Ritual. Ritual helps people fill the gaps in their diet with no shady additives, fillers, or colorants. These two easy-to-take capsules provide 10 nutrients to support a strong foundation for your health. Ritual is a brand I can trust because while I've taken multivitamins for years and years and years, I like their transparency, and it's why I prefer them, because it's when it comes to the ingredients they use, they tell us how they get them and why and where they're actually from, as well as their environmental impact. It's just those little things that go a longer way for me, on top of the transparency about their packaging and materials, because they use 100% recycled materials, and their mailers are used from recycled newsprint and plant fibers. So again, to me, this just lines up with some of my core values. Beyond being delivered to your door via a subscription, Ritual is also vegan-friendly, non-GMO, gluten-free, allergen-free, and contains no sugar. So what are you waiting for? Fill in the gaps in your diet with Essential for Men, a small step that helps support a healthy foundation for your body. Ritual are offering 20% off your first month with Ritual by going to ritual.com/MattyPlays20 and using my code MattyPlays20 at checkout. Thank you again to Ritual for sponsoring today's video. But hey, speaking of Starfield, let's get right into it. So last we spoke about Starfield's rating, it was in Australia. Now, Australia has been aggressive on the ratings board in the past. What we learned through the Australian ratings board with Starfield was that drug use would be a thing you see pretty often in Starfield. And this would make sense because we learned about Neon in one of the game's early trailers, which is defined as a pleasure city with a brand new drug present there. And given Bethesda Game Studios' history in Australia, where they had to change morphine to Med-X in Fallout 3, it wasn't too surprising to see Australia went hard on this again. But when you see something restricted for 18+, that's a pretty aggressive rating, and oftentimes for the ESRB, for here in the West, it softens a bit. We do have, thanks to Starfield's own updated banner over on Twitter, is some information that you may find interesting at that. So if you go ahead and check out the new banner, you'll see up close and personal, Starfield is rated M, 17+, for violence, blood, suggestive themes, strong language, and use of drugs. Now, following Bethesda slipping out the rating from the ESRB, the rating summary has now been published, and there's quite a bit of information we can take away from this beyond any of the blood and gore stuff we're going to get into, which is the rating summary here. It says, this is an open-world role-playing game in which players assume the role of a miner tasked with finding artifacts across the galaxy. From first/third-person perspectives, players interact with various characters, complete quests, and search for supplies while battling enemies like humans, robots, alien creatures. Players use futuristic guns, lasers, axes, and explosives to kill enemies. Combat is fast-paced with frequent gunfire, cries of pain, and explosions. Attacks on some enemies can result in blood splatter effects. Several environments depict blood stains on the ground around corpses, so there's your environmental storytelling. The game contains some suggestive material in the dialogue, and after sharing a bed with characters, so this is going to be that Fallout 4 type of romance, they say, life is a sexually transmitted disease that's 100% fatal, or I'm all for getting a little wild, but next time let's try it without the jetpacks. Kind of reminds me of McCready with the mute fruit stuff. Talk about seeing stars. Woo, that was amazing. A fictional drug, Aurora, so this goes back to the neon planet we were talking about, is prominent in the game with a section involving characters working in an illicit drug lab. Players can also obtain Aurora by stealing or buying it from vendors. Consuming Aurora results in a distortion effect on the screen, which we've seen before in Fallout. The words fuck and bullshit appear in the game. Now, what's also caught people's eyes, because the rest of that's pretty self-explanatory, is the bottom left corner where they mention in-game purchases. Now, a lot of folks went, oh, it's microtransactions. And hey, that's always possible because technically Creation Club is a microtransaction storefront. This could also be based off our speculation and purely speculation that Skyrim is going to get some sort of marketplace. That's a whole separate topic we've done deep dives on. If you want to check out that content, it is still available. But I had predicted that if Skyrim's going to get a marketplace and Starfield is likely going to be the only entry in the series we get for at least probably a decade when you think about Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5 being the next games from Bethesda Game Studios. We're probably not going to see Starfield for a while, so you need content in the game that's going to support itself, and Bethesda can only spread themselves so thin. So what do? They have the fans make the content. That's where the marketplace comes in, and they can sell stuff that fans make, kind of like what Minecraft does. That's theory number 2. And then number 3, which is the definite one and why this is listed here, in-game purchases, does mean, DLC. This does mean, hey, you bought an expansion pack, that type of stuff. So I wouldn't go crazy yet. Of course, we can hold ourselves back until there truly is something to react to. But there's actually decent amount of information here, from a new weapon type like an axe to some of the suggestive dialogue, what Aurora does when you consume it, that there is going to be blood splatters on the environment, which I think we assumed would at least be the case. No gore is mentioned here, as we discussed earlier, and in-game purchases. So a lot to take away from the rating summary, indeed. Now you'll look at this and go, okay, Maddie, oh, you're really starving for Bethesda news, aren't you? It's like, actually, no. One thing that we picked up on during the 2022 gameplay reveal for Starfield was when your man took out the double-barrel shotgun and let loose on someone about 2 feet away from you, no blood, no gore, nothing. And that was a little bit disappointing, but we were wondering, is it on quality mode? Is it just an early build where this stuff has yet to be implemented? But the big thing was, is there going to be that ridiculous gore factor that we saw in Fallout 4, in Fallout 3, in Fallout New Vegas? Or would that just be specific to that series? Because even in something like Skyrim, you could decapitate your foes when you get the right perk upgrades. So what I did was a little bit of digging just to see what some of the descriptions and breakdowns for respectively Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim and Fallout 4 were. Let's start off with Skyrim, where you'll see just a brief snippet says blood and gore, intense violence, sexual themes, and a use of alcohol. Again, going back to the drugs specifically rather than alcohol here in Skyrim, I think that again leans heavily into that neon pleasure city that we're going to see in Starfield. Now, moving it over to Fallout 4, you'll see the description is blood and gore, intense violence, strong language, and again, use of drugs, which we already know how that works in Fallout. Now, you'll notice both these games had blood and gore. However, if you go back to Starfield, you're going to see that it was just described to have blood, no gore. So what this likely means, I mean, it's self-explanatory, right? That the enemies will bleed, but you're not going to probably be bursting them to bits, taking off their head. I don't imagine any limbs will be removed in this game. So keep that in mind. Then again, though, when you look at something like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, you were able to remove the limbs of enemies. So sometimes gore, I guess, isn't factored in that way if there isn't blood surrounding it. I don't know how exactly the ESRB fully breaks that aspect down, because again, you're chopping off stormtrooper arms, not legs, just arms, and maybe that's the lowest you can go before you're pushing into that M rating. But it doesn't outright completely cancel it out. But I would say just get your expectations in check. It's also interesting to see strong language is a factor, although I feel it was somewhat expected because Starfield looks to be shooting a bit more mature, if you will. Whereas something like Elder Scrolls, you're not going to see a ton of cursing. Like, you'll hear gods be damned, but none of that like F word, S word. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Sorry, I don't trust YouTube demonetization. I don't censor myself like this. often. But that's what's going on with the Starfield rating. Just a little bit of a breakdown so you can get an idea of what to expect. Obviously, we're just a short couple of weeks away now, so we'll lay eyes on it. And maybe this ends up being wrong, but that's just my analysis of the ratings breakdown. Let's go ahead and move on over to the Fallout TV show. As I mentioned before, these leaks continue to help Bethesda, continue to help Amazon out. Originally, there was really no faith. The question around a Fallout TV show was quite strong. Like, why are we going to do this? But at this point, I feel like Amazon has to know it's working in their favor. I mean, the amount of videos, screenshots, just blatantly on set. Now they're no longer in this blurry, awful quality. We're getting pretty clear-cut shots of things happening. But note that there's no real story details, script details. Call me slow on the matter, but I'm starting to wonder if we got a couple of plants on the scene here to slowly market it to the hardcore fan base to kind of get the energy going. Because before this, and it's purely anecdotal, there really wasn't hype. There was curiosity, maybe morbid curiosity at that, but there wasn't like, oh my God, it's a Fallout show. It was more like we want a game. Why are y'all making a show? I guess we'll take it. But now it's more like, okay, bring on the show. Bring on the show. So here are 4 new shots we're going to go over. Let's start off with what I think is the most important one of them all. Our first look at ghouls in the Fallout TV show. And you'll see here this same character that we've seen, I believe, as a teacher in one of the shots earlier on, is handing a bottle of Nuka-Cola to a ghoul. Now, in the terms of the actual ghoul's presentation, I like how he's got a cigarette in his mouth. I gotta say that this looks pretty good to me. A little spongy, if you will. I was hoping to see a couple more patches of skin ripped off, but we'll see afterwards with the editing that goes on with these shows, how they turn out. But as a starter, this looks pretty good to me and is a good indication of our first look at ghouls. We already know that we have Walter Goggins stepping in as one of the main characters who will be a ghoul in this show, so I'm very excited to see that angle. And continuing on, we get a look at some in-universe objects like a terminal. And I love the detail here because I'm pretty sure, and I can't tell even when I zoom in because the image is low res, but I think that's a Vault-Tec logo on the ruler. I just appreciate that because it's not going to be picked up by most people, I imagine, especially when you're watching the show. Like, who cares? But I just really appreciate the lengths they're going to. You can see the Vault-Tec symbol surrounding the window itself. But this terminal, I mean, man, the Fallout vibes are strong. Some people actually did some digging, and it looks like this is an old computer, like 1970s. So really obscure deep dive here, but absolutely love how they're representing the in-world objects. We also may have our first potential call to, and this is a reach, by the way. This is heavy Matty speculations. It could just be the US government, but we do see here a little bit of graffiti that just says government, and I don't know what says beneath that, but the reason I pointed out is it could be our first indication of something with the Enclave. For those who don't know much about the Enclave, they are the remnants of the United States government. So I wonder if they'll appear and how they'll appear. They're arguably my favorite faction in Fallout. I gotta say, Fallout 76 was one of those moments that opened my eyes and went, oh, they're actually really cool, because even at launch, when the game was in its worst state, I was playing it and appreciating parts of the story because of their focus on the Enclave. And that's when it sank in. I went, yeah, this is probably my favorite faction in this world. So I'm wondering if there's going to be any type of connection there. I hope so. I hope they make some type of appearance. I think it's just necessary. Fingers crossed they do. But again, it could just be a reach, and this could just be old world graffiti talking about how the US government had betrayed them, because Vault-Tec effectively is experimenting on humans before they enter the actual world itself again and start to rebuild and grow once more. And then here is another shot photo of an exterior look at the vault entrance. So overall, a decent amount of looks at different parts of the show. My excitement remains the same. I'm very optimistic, at least in the terms of representation. I always go back to the Halo TV show, where I have to be fair, I haven't watched it, but I think of little things like the Hummer in the background that's just completely overlooked. And it does feel like, love them or hate them in their Fallout games, it feels like Bethesda does have a hand in this, because the costume design we've seen leaked, the set photos we've seen leaked, like, things feel like callbacks to the game while still representing the real world stuff very well. So don't want to give a full tip of the cap yet until I see it all in action, but right now looking pretty good, still looking good. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on the ghouls and what you feel about them, because I'm wondering if anyone's going to feel a little different about them. But to me, I want to see that all in action. And so now we move on to our third story. This one, ladies and gentlemen, I got to say, is fascinating. Now, when you look at it at face value, you're going to think, well, okay. But when you dig deeper and you see how much Redfall is buried beneath, it is pretty scary, I would say. So The Gamer posted an article titled "Redfall is Bethesda's lowest rated game on Steam, Dishonored the highest." Now, as a huge Dishonored fan, I looked at this and went, okay, obviously. And look, as someone who's covered this Redfall situation a lot, even I looked at that and went, maybe they're just trying to capitalize on all the traffic that this game's generating. It's possible. Let me check it out, right? Open-minded Matty steps in and starts to play around. So I actually look at this list and I went, wait, no, they've got something here. This is actually really interesting. So I don't mean to dunk too hard here, but when you look at the stuff from Bethesda, you got to wade through. And as much as I like Bethesda, they've published some pretty bad stuff in the past. To find Redfall at the absolute bottom of everything they've put out. Can I emphasize that one more time? Everything they've put out. What do I mean by that? Oh, let's take a look. So you'll see here, the top of the list, you'll see Dishonored, Hi-Fi Rush, Fallout New Vegas, Dishonored Definitive Edition. Okay, like that's a sensible top 4 from Bethesda. This makes a lot of sense. These are some of their highly touted games, best reviewed games. This doesn't mean, by the way, best performing games, but best reviewed games. And it is just Steam, so it's a vertical slice, but it's a pretty big chunk of the market. It's definitely the dominant place in PC gaming, so it is something to go with. Now, when you go to the bottom, and you see Redfall there, all the way at the bottom, last option in the Bethesda search, and you start to look around at what is above it, literally everything else they've put out. So yes, Fallout first, the very controversial subscription service for Fallout 76, is rated higher than Redfall. Fallout 4's, I'm going to be blunt, pretty unimaginative workshop DLC has ranked above Redfall. And also, Skyrim's Anniversary Edition upgrade has ranked above Redfall, which I find to be a surprise because any PC player absolutely loathes when a new update comes to Skyrim because it resets the whole mod list. Not only that, but Wolfenstein Youngblood is above Redfall. Look, I was not a fan of Redfall, but to see that on Steam, it is rated that low where it's below Fallout 76. And obviously, volume of ratings plays a factor here. You're going to get more ratings for Redfall than Fallout 76's subscription service. That's just the way things are going to go. But the way that Redfall is raced to the bottom is fascinating. And I know it comes across as a jab and a dunk, but we really got to take a moment to observe this is not one of those passing, oh man, it's just a negative story. Because I started to see that energy. You know, the news cycle is doomed to repeat itself constantly. People are already expressing, we're tired of hearing about Redfall, and man, people are just being hard on it. It's not that bad. And I'm not here to tell you what you should love or dislike. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to give you my opinions and thoughts on the information that's publicly available and just try to inform the best I can. But we do need to take a moment to really accept and, I would say, breathe in the fact that Redfall has been this catastrophic. And I know some people have said, well, that point has already been established. But when I see people already going, this is getting dramatic now, I'm like, no, this is significant on all fronts. Not only are people's opinions out there kind of proving the point, but we're starting to see data prove it. But what truly is the most important piece of information that I think we're going to get eventually, as almost a double middle finger from Bethesda if it ends up going in their direction, is the player count for Redfall. Which is something I've said before that I even after the review, I could still see this game getting a lot of players. There was too much talk about this game. No matter how bad it was, how bad it looked to people, there was too much talk where I have seen so many people where undoubtedly with Game Pass, people are going to flock. Now, that'll be without numbers like sales. I'm curious how it does the month after when it's really busy in June. I'm curious if Tears of the Kingdom has any effect. There's a lot that could be lost in this data, but I have no doubt that this information will certainly be on its way. And I say that because Bethesda never issued any sort of statement, right? It's not an unfamiliar sight to see a game poorly reviewed. But when it's so bad that your head of Xbox steps out for an interview, kind of, I don't want to say blast the game because I don't want to make it sound too negative, but definitely shows some disappointment in the game, to say the least. And there's no comment on like, here's how we're patching it, here's how we're fixing it. They just sort of sit there in silence. I think says to me that there are some metrics potentially suggesting, hey, this isn't as bad. We are working with some type of player base here, but also it's possible Phil just went out and took the bullet for them and they're just going to sit there and hang out and just get back to work. We'll see, of course, but just spitballing a bit. To my original point, I don't want to hammer home too much negativity on this, but I do want people to understand it is truly that bad. And it's a sad situation because I feel for Arcane, man. Like, I don't think that's been said enough, that this is a team that has delivered Game of the Year quality material constantly. And then I'm disappointed as a fan because the one time I'm seeing them consistently in the news cycle, and I hate to say it as well, the one time content performs well around them is when people are too busy dunking on them. It's just the way of the internet, but you know, and I'm going to do my job. It's not like I sit here and regret, how could I have covered them that way? I mean, I'm going to give you all my honest opinion no matter what. But for them, I just feel like I wish and do hope that with their next game, if it ends up being great, that we get a higher energy in the positive direction, because I feel like they've delivered before and just never got their roses. So I imagine morale's pretty low for them, and hopefully they can bounce back. But just some news on what's going on in the world of Bethesda. I look forward to seeing your thoughts on everything from top to bottom. So fire away. With that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.